They made 5,000 bars of soap and told the world they were infused with Sydney Sweeney's bathwater. Not a metaphor. Not a joke that lived and died on Twitter. A real product, released in limited supply, sold out almost instantly and reposted everywhere like a dare. People weren't arguing about soap. They were arguing about her. And that was the point. Because the moment that story hit, Sydney Sweeney was unavoidable. Timelines flooded. Group chats lit up. Think pieces followed. And yet, beneath all that noise, something strange was happening. The internet couldn't stop talking about her, but fewer people were actually showing up for her movies. That contradiction is where this story really begins. Just a few years ago, Sydney was everywhere in a different way. She came out of Euphoria positioned as the next serious breakout. Critics praised her range. Studios lined her up for lead roles. Brand deals followed. They felt secondary to the acting career she was clearly trying to build. The narrative was clean, talented, ambitious, ascending. Then 2025 arrived and the narrative cracked. Her film started underperforming, quietly at first, then loudly. Projects that were meant to cement her as a box office force stalled out. Openings were soft, drops were brutal, and while that was happening, her visibility online didn't shrink. It exploded. Not because of her performances, but because of controversy. And the first spark wasn't political, it was marketing. The bathwater soap wasn't just a stunt, it was a test of how far irony and shock could stretch before they snapped an image in half. For some people, it was a smart, self-aware move. If the internet is already obsessing over you, why not monetize the obsession? Turn the joke into a paycheck. For others, it felt like a step backward. An actress who had been fighting to be taken seriously suddenly reduced to a novelty item. Something collectible, consumable, laughable. That divide mattered because it revealed something fragile about her positioning. Sydney wasn't known as a shock value personality. She wasn't built like an influencer whose entire brand revolved around provocation. She was supposed to be different. So when she leaned into something this meme-worthy, it didn't just generate attention, it reframed how people saw her. And before that framing could settle, the next controversy hit. American Eagle released a campaign with Sydney built around a simple pun. Great jeans. Harmless on the surface. But the campaign leaned into the word jeans, pairing denim imagery with lines about inherited traits. In isolation, it might have passed unnoticed, but timing is everything. In a climate where people are hyper-aware of coded language, visuals, and subtext, the internet didn't read it as neutral. Clips circulated. One explanation in particular went viral, and suddenly people weren't talking about denim anymore. They were talking about implications, about beauty standards, about history, about whether the ad echoed ideas it shouldn't have touched. Defenders pushed back hard, calling the backlash ridiculous, accusing critics of projecting meaning where none existed. Critics doubled down, arguing that intent didn't erase impact. Within days, the ad was no longer just an ad. It was a Rorschach test. What you saw in it said more about you than about the campaign itself. And that's when the story stopped being about fashion and became something else entirely. Reports surfaced that Sydney had registered as a Republican in Florida in mid-2024. Not years ago. Not in the distant past. Recent enough to feel relevant. That detail didn't exist in a vacuum. It dropped straight into an already heated conversation and instantly changed the tone. Now the ad wasn't just misunderstood, it was revealing. Or so people claimed. Political figures jumped in. Public praise followed. Commentary escalated. Suddenly, Sydney Sweeney wasn't just an actress in a controversial campaign. She was being talked about as a symbol, a stand-in for arguments about culture, backlash, attraction, and ideology. And the strangest part was that she wasn't really participating in any of it. For months, she said almost nothing. That silence did what silence always does online. It multiplied interpretations. Some people took it as quiet confidence. Others took it as avoidance. Some saw strategy. Others saw fear. But no matter how it was read, the absence of clarification let the narrative run on its own rails. And it didn't stop with politics. The conversation spilled into corners of the internet that usually pretend celebrity news doesn't exist. Tech figures, venture capital voices, commentators who rarely engage with Hollywood suddenly started posting about Sydney constantly. Not her acting, not her films, her image, her face, what she represented. She became less of a person and more of a talking point, a proxy for debates that had nothing to do with her actual work. At that point, the discourse wasn't even about her anymore. It was about the reaction to the reaction. Journalists asking direct questions got dragged. Interviews became content farms. Clips were turned into memes the machine fed itself. Eventually, Sydney did speak. She said she was against hate. She pushed back on the labels being attached to her. She expressed frustration at how far the conversation had drifted from her intentions. But by then, the damage, or at least the shift, had already happened. Once the internet decides what role you play, it's hard to rewrite the script. And while all of this was unfolding online, the numbers kept telling a quieter, harsher story. Her boxing drama, Christie, was supposed to be a turning point, a transformation role. Physical training, critical praise, the kind of performance that usually signals awards potential. Instead, it opened weak and collapsed almost immediately, suffering one of the steepest second-week drops in recent box office history. Critics liked it. Audiences didn't show up. That contrast is the heart of the problem. Sydney Sweeney had more attention than ever. More conversation, more visibility. But attention doesn't automatically turn into tickets sold. And in Hollywood, that gap is lethal. Some analysts argued the controversies had alienated parts of her audience. Others argued the films themselves simply weren't compelling enough. But the result was the same. She was famous everywhere and bankable nowhere. A name people recognized, debated, and argued over, but didn't prioritize when deciding how to spend their Friday night. That's the visibility trap. Being talked about instead of chosen. What made it even more uncomfortable was how the loudest online support didn't translate into real-world backing. People defended her fiercely on social media. They framed her as proof of something larger. But that support stayed digital. It didn't move box office numbers. It didn't protect her films from disappearing after opening weekend. Then came The Housemaid. Unlike her recent prestige-leaning projects, this one had built-in momentum. A popular book, a clear genre hook, a director known for crowd pleasers. When it released, it performed noticeably better than the films before it, even while competing against massive franchises. It wasn't a total redemption, but it was a signal. The audience was still there, when the project met them where they were. And that's what makes this moment so pivotal. Sydney Sweeney isn't finished, far from it, but she's standing at a crossroads that a lot of modern celebrities hit without realizing it. One path leads deeper into being a symbol, a lightning rod, someone the internet uses to fight its battles. The other path leads back to something quieter but more durable, work that speaks louder than discourse. The danger isn't backlash. Backlash fades. The real danger is misalignment, when what you're famous for drifts too far from what you actually do, when your name trends more than your performances, when the audience knows your controversies better than your characters. Sydney still has talent. She still has visibility. She still has leverage. But the next choices matter more than any soap stunt or denim ad ever could, because fame in the digital era is easy to inflate and hard to convert. You can be everywhere and still be optional. The internet can make you unavoidable. It just can't make people buy a ticket.